Welcome to another scriptural study. As always, please place your computer screen on full screen and feel free to stop the video at any time to obtain the full value of the scriptural passages being shared, let alone the associated information. In this particular study, we will be discussing the recent news on the Arches of Baal that once again will be resurrected into our very lives in cities all over the world. And we will as well discuss the other non-scriptural architectural objects of worship. And our scriptural study will be focusing on a scriptural verse contained in the book of Shemoth or Exodus chapter 34, verse 14, which reads, "But break down their altars and smash their pillars and cut down their Asherim." And we will be focusing on architectural objects of the past, such as the archaeological altars, pillars, and Asherim that are non-scriptural, and why they are non-scriptural, let alone just how they are making a comeback in society today. As per the multitudes of articles recently, it turns out that the exact day when reproductions of the Arch of Baal and its gateway pillars that stood in front of the Temple of Baal way back when are going to be resurrected in Times Square in New York City and in Trafalgar Square in London. And if that's not bizarre enough for you, think about this. On the pagan day of April 19th, it is also the exact day when a very important occult festival related to the worship of Baal begins. April 19th is the first day of a 13-day period of time known as the blood sacrifice to the beast that culminates on the high occult World's Holy Day of Beltane on May 1st. In some parts of the world, Beltane is much better known as May Day. And this, my friends, is not what the scriptures support. Oh, and by the way, May Day has been described as the Illuminati's second most sacred holy day. And there is so much more, but that is just another study. Is it just a coincidence that reproductions of the arch that stood in front of the Temple of Baal in Palmyra, Syria, are going up in New York and London on the precise day when the Feast of Molech is celebrated and when the blood sacrifice to the beast begins? The organization in charge of this so-called cultural project is the Institute for Digital Archeology. The following verbiage comes directly from their website. Please take the time to stop the video to read what they are sharing on why they are doing this. Regrettably, the majority of those still in the world will accept this lame reason. The point is this: are we to believe that this date was chosen at random? Is it just some sort of weird accident and or coincidence that the date they decided on begins a 13-day period of time, which is exceedingly significant for the worship of Baal? And again, as per our other videos, test and prove all things for yourselves, because you will easily find that the pagan date of April 19th is the first day of the 13th day Satanic ritual day relating to fire, the fire deity, Baal or Molech, known as Nimrod, the Sun Deity, also known as the Roman deity Saturn or Satan the devil. This day in ancient history was dedicated to a major human sacrifice day, demanding fire sacrifice with an emphasis on children. And as such, any child would have the basic common sense in asking why any organization and or any individual in this day and age would want to resurrect anything that has to do with this subject matter. Have we not witnessed enough violence in history to date? Some believe recent events are related to the subject matter. The following list of events that have happened on or around the pagan date of April 19th comes from an article in the Vigilant Citizen. Whether this is true and or not would inevitably come down to discussions of speculation. But there is definitely no speculation that the worship of Baal throughout history can be traced through archaeology, all the way back to an ancient king of Babylon that is known in Sumerian sources as Enmerkar, but that is known in the scriptures as Nimrod. Nimrod established the very first New World Order in the ancient world, and he fundamentally changed the course of human history. After he passed away, this ancient king of Babylon eventually came to be worshipped as a sun god under a whole host of different names, such as Marduk, Osiris, Apollo, etc. In fact, many scriptural scholars are entirely convinced that there is some sort of connection between the ancient figure of Nimrod and the coming anti-Messiah. So is it just a coincidence that we are erecting arches for this ancient deity in New York and London on a date that is exceedingly significant for those that worship this ancient deity? Could it be possible that there is more to these gateways that are being constructed than we are being told? Could it be possible that we are laying out a giant welcome sign for things that we are not to even contemplate and or explore? Let's now go to the scriptures to find the rest of the answers to this question. Baal Arches contained in their temples pillars. They were the same as the archaeological structures of obelisks that were situated in Mitzrayim, known as Egypt today. These structures were dedicated to the worship of the sun and had a phallic meaning behind them in their temples and altars. In the scriptures, there were also pagan monuments known as Asherah, and as well Asherah poles, which scripturally were forbidden because of the reference towards phallic symbolism, which led to phallic practices, let alone what female deity these monuments were dedicated to. With little and or no effort, you will quickly learn that these Asherim are linked to a mother deity known as Asherah. Feel free to stop the video and read the article. A Babylonian woman known as Semiramis is scripturally known as the Queen of Heaven, who was none other than Asherah, Nimrod's wife. Remember, Nimrod is Baal. Are we starting to understand why we do not want to be associated, let alone support the world and its organizations with these Baal Arches? The Almighty in both the Old Covenant and even the Messianic writings sternly advise us of building them, let alone guiding us to eliminate the ones that existed. As we read in the book of Shemoth, meaning the name, change and Hellenize to the book of Exodus chapter 34 verse 13, which states again, "But break down their altars and smash their pillars and cut down their Asherim." Even ISIS, on their assault on the Syrian city of Palmyra, did not get the full job done, as they left the Arch of Baal fully standing. Why? Again, the scriptures are extremely clear on what we are to do with anything from Baal, which includes arches, altars, pillars, poles, and or statues of Semiramis, the so-called Queen of Heaven, the very wife of Baal. And you can pick any translation. Feel free once again to stop the video to see all of the translations. They are all uniform in context and in meaning. And then there are the multitude of associated scriptural passages as it relates to the subject matter. But let's even do a more comprehensive and or a deeper dive scripturally, and as well historically. The well-known pointed obelisks, or sun pillars of Egypt as an example, are found in the scriptures in the Hebrew words matzabah and hamanim. The word matzabah is best translated as pillars or as sun pillars, and the word hamanim as sun images. Notice that our Almighty Father demands for us in His very word of Scripture to eliminate these pillars and our sun pillars. But the world religions defiantly remain to this very day in the power centers of this world, in world finance, and again world religion, and yes, the world's military machine. In the book of Yirmiyahu, or Jeremiah chapter 43 verse 13, this matzabah, or sun pillars, are identified as those obelisks found in Beth Shemesh, in Greek known as Heliopolis, in the land of Mitzrayim or Egypt. Regrettably, the King James Version rendered this word matzabah in most places as images instead of obelisks or pillars, as the other English versions correctly do. In the book of Shemoth, or Exodus, chapter 23, verse 24, Israel was commanded to break down these pillars of the heathen nations. Yahuwah repeated this in Exodus chapter 34, verse 13, Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 5, and Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 3. And here we are unwittingly resurrecting these things in New York, in London, on the pagan day of April 19th, the very date which is the first day of the 13-day Satanic ritual day relating to fire, the fire deity, Baal, or Moloch, known as Nimrod, the Sun Deity, also known as the Roman deity, or Saturn, Satan, the devil. And there are many other places in Scripture that state that these pillars, or sun pillars, are emphatically described as an abomination by our Almighty One. Israel was not only commanded to break down these pagan pillars, or sun pillars, they were strictly commanded not to erect them, as we read in the book of Leviticus, chapter 26, verse 1. But in Deuteronomy, chapter 16, verse 22, our Almighty One says that He hates them. Diodorus, a Greek historian, spoke of an obelisk 130 feet high, which was erected by Queen Semiramis in Babylon, which you can further read of in a book by J.G.R. Forlong entitled Encyclopedia of Religions on page 248. In Babylon, the phallic symbolism seems to have been more of the important aspect of these objects of worship. However, in Egypt, more emphasis was put on its sun symbolism, pointing upwards to the sun, and also described as a sun ray. These obelisks were commonly erected at the entrance to the temples of Isis or other temples of the numerous sun deities of Egypt, especially in the city of Heliopolis known as Beth Shemesh, scripturally, for its sun symbolism as well as for its phallic meaning as well. In the book of Ezekiel, chapter 8, it clearly describes to us the mixture of Israel's true worship with that of sun worship in the form of what is known as Tammuz worship, Tammuz being the young sun deity in verse 14, and as well as the 25 elders worshiping the sun towards the east, as we read in verse 16. We further read in verses 3 and 5 what is known as the image of jealousy, which was erected in the entrance to the temple. In the Schofield Reference Bible, it regards this image of jealousy to be phallic, as we can read on page 847. The Lamb's Bible, as well as the New English Bible, have rendered this as the image of lust. Travelers to Rome all know about the famous obelisk at the entrance of St. Peter's in Rome itself. It is not a mere copy of an Egyptian obelisk. It is one of the very same obelisks that stood in Egypt and Heliopolis in ancient times. When the mystery religion came to pagan Rome, Egyptian obelisks, especially from Heliopolis, were hauled at great expense and erected by the Roman emperors. Caligula, in 37 to 41 BCE, had this very same obelisk brought from Heliopolis, Egypt, to his circus on the Vatican Hill, where it now stands at St. Peter's. It is 83 feet high, 132 feet with its foundation, and weighs 320 tons. Pope Sixtus V ordered it to be moved a little in 1586 in order to center it in front of St. Peter's. The sun pillar from Heliopolis, which the Mighty One has ordered to be destroyed, was not destroyed. Rather, it was erected right in the entrance to St. Peter's, a memorial to the fusion of sun worship with the original messianic belief. The majority of church builders that have been built over the centuries have a tower. Each generation of church builders has copied the former generation, probably never questioning the origin of the idea. The scriptural temple of Yahuwah does not have a pointed tower or pointed pillars in its design. Similar to the sun pillar or obelisks, these pointed towers of churches can be traced back to Babylon. Many of the towers that were built in the Babylonian Empire were not watchtowers, but were religious towers. The world religion of Islam has maintained this architectural design to this very day. In a book by J.B. Bury entitled The Cambridge Ancient History, Egypt and Babylonia, Volume 1, page 533, we read in Babylonian times, a stranger entering a Babylonian city would have no difficulty locating its temple. We are told, for high above the flat-roofed houses, its tower could be seen. We are also told by the Catholic Encyclopedia, quote, "It is a striking fact that most Babylonian cities possessed a temple tower," end of quote, which we can read on page 185 of the Volume 2 edition. Whether it be a tower, a steeple, or a spire, they are all unscriptural. Several writers think, and not without some justification, the towers, steeples, and spires are all influenced by the ancient obelisk. Sanger Brown, in his book entitled Sex Worship and Symbolism of Primitive Races on page 38, states, quote, "There is evidence," says one, "to show that the spires of our churches owe their existence to the uprights or obelisks outside the temples of former ages." End of quote. Lillian Eichler, in her book entitled The Customs of Mankind, on page 55 shares, quote, "There are still in existence today remarkable specimens of original phallic symbols, steeples on churches, and obelisks." End of quote. All world religions have failed, sadly, as they have failed to destroy the obelisks or sun pillars of sun worship. And they keep on erecting new ones, similar to the obelisks nowadays standing separate from the main building, often similar to the obelisks of old. And to make matters worse, the world and its world religions will accept the arches of Baal about to be resurrected. Babylon is indeed rising once again. However, this will continue only till the time of the end time. For we read, quote, "The ashram and the sun pillars shall rise no more," end of quote, as we can read in the book of Yeshayahu or Isaiah chapter 27, verse 9. Indeed, the Mighty One himself will destroy them in the end time. He will cut everyone from the pagan carved images along with the pillars, let alone the Baal Arches. And he will pluck the ashram from our midst, because no one finally will ever be able to worship the work of our hands anymore. As our cities will be destroyed, as we read in the book of Micah chapter 5, verses 13 and 14. And if any of us are examining ourselves to figure out whether or not we are in the belief and using the Ten Commandments, well, if we support this in any shape, form, or manner, we have to forego Commandments 1 and 2 of the 10 words and or the commandments. A friend of mine in the Word sent this email to me with the scriptural passages from Yeshayahu chapter 10, verse 10, and again Isaiah or Yeshayahu chapter 10, verses 23 through 26. Please feel free to stop the video and read them. My friend in the Word believes that verse 10 is stating the evil being done, namely idols that excelled others, and the fact that there have always been various idols in New York and London and across the earth, but this time it's to slap Yahuwah with disrespect so as to erect the Baal temple of Abaddon, Apollo, Zeus, the beast, the anti-Messiah, which indeed is beyond measure of the other idols previous to this. He also shares that in verse 23, this declares an end to it abruptly. And then he goes on to share that verse 24 declares that Yahuwah will lift his staff, creating a large wall of water, just like the walls on either side of the Red Sea that were lifted up by the staff of Moshe from Yahuwah. He goes on to say that verse 25 declares destruction, and that verse 26 declares that the sea will be lifted up, which is how a giant tsunami is created, either by an earthquake, a meteor, or by an explosion, and that it will lift walls of water just like there were walls of water through the Red Sea. One wall to New York and one wall to London. However it will happen, it is clear that the Scripture well in advance has shared we must break down these altars, pillars, and Asherim. The world and its world religions are all unified in lies, and with extreme arrogance that they all can muster up together as one, will once again allow Babylon to rise, because there is no belief and or desire to be in the way and or the splendor of set apartness of Yahuwah himself. We hope and pray these scriptural studies are of value to you and your loved ones. Feel free to critique from a scriptural standpoint, of course. Till next time, Yahuwah willing, all the best in the name which is above all names.